start wishing everybody a very, very happy new year. Glad to see everybody hale and hearty. As we normally do, Manoj will walk us through the understanding of the house on the economy, the markets, and we'll slightly change the format based on feedback we received earlier. We'll try and cover a few sectors specifically to see what the action is happening in those sectors. We may or may not have presence in the sectors, but we'll just spend a few minutes on that. And because we obviously can't cover every sector in detail in the time that we have. And then we will try to wind up between 25 to 30 minutes into the call and leave the space for Q&A. We already have a few questions that have come over email, so we'll start with them first. And then after that, we will, time permitting, we will take on additional questions. So, Manoj, over to you.
Okay, so as I said last year, we have almost made it a tradition to start with COVID Vandana. And in the light of what we are seeing now, I think it merits some amount of our time. So as we speak, the world has already seen a fourth wave, and a fifth wave is getting started, whereas India is seeing the start of the third wave. However, what is very clearly noticeable is that the current waves are much steeper than earlier. People are getting infected much faster. And so far as India is concerned, we have crossed the first wave figures in just about 10 days time. So between December 27th to January 7th, we have seen the cases, the daily new cases crossing the 1 lakh per day mark. But what we will also see is that the cases will also come down quite steeply, going by what we are seeing elsewhere in the globe. In fact, this cycle will happen much faster. The lockdowns will also come soon. We are expecting that by end of January, we will cross the second wave numbers. The daily caseload will increase by 1 million a day, forcing governments to come up with various levels of lockdowns. We will not have a complete lockdown the way we had it in March and April of 2020. We still do not have data in India with respect to how many of single vaxxed and double vaxxed people are getting admitted, etc. But what preliminary data suggests is that vaccinated people are also getting infected, but the severity is much lower. The recovery is much faster. Now, our take on COVID is that, as I said, the cases will not only rise very steeply, but the wave will also ebb very fast. And this is not coming out of my understanding of Omicron or any of the medical aspects, but pure mass psychology. In India, we have seen that we simply don't adhere to rules until the time it hits us badly. Right from the start of COVID in March 2020 itself, we knew that if we use sanitizers, wear masks, and maintain social distancing, we would be able to avoid COVID. However, we refuse to abide by any of these until we reach a crisis situation. And that is what will happen now. The cases will significantly rise. The government will come up with lockdowns and measures and curfews. And then people will realize that they have to carry on with work. And therefore, the masks will come out, the sanitizers will come out, and then we will see a reduction in the numbers. So the recovery that we were talking of, India was doing quite well. As I told during our last phone call, we were inching back quite significantly. RBI had projected a 9.5% growth rate for the full year. We have had 4 consecutive quarters of positive growth. But these numbers will now have to be reworked, and we expect the growth rates for the full year to be around 9%. We should be falling short by about 0.5 percentage point for the annual levels. So the immediate question is, what will be the impact of that in the market? And for that, the answer is it has already been factored in. We must understand that while we discuss GDP and all the macros, GDP, the market is a lead indicator of GDP growth. So GDP, the market anticipates ahead of time and factors in the possible change in the GDP. And therefore, the dip that we had seen in the last quarter, October, November, December periods, has already factored in a possible slowdown in the economy because of the third wave. Of course, that is not the only thing that impacts the market. So let us now look at some other macros, and then we will talk about markets separately. Of course, data is not available for the third quarter, that is Q3, October, November, December. But what we see from GST collections and other indicators is that the economy is fully back to normal. Now, this will get impacted in the coming quarter. So Q4 will get impacted. But whenever the Q3 numbers get released, they'll definitely look very positive. The second criteria that we look at in macros is inflation. And inflation has been inching up. For November, it was about 4.91% as per recently released data. Our house view is that inflation continues to be within the RBI target of 4 to 6%. And while it is expected to inch up a little further, maybe 5.2, 5.3%, it is unlikely to cause an increase in interest rates. The government has clearly taken a stand to keep the interest rates low, and irrespective of what is happening in the US, where the tapering issue is being discussed and interest rate hike is being discussed, in India, we are unlikely to see a rise in interest rates. Of course, there will be definitely no further fall in interest rates. Interest rates are unlikely to go down, but the possibility of an interest rate hike is also not there. Couple of reasons. Inflation is under control, and government has explicitly taken a stand to keep a very supportive monetary policy, if I may say. That brings us to the issue of US, what is happening in the US, because that directly impacts all over the world. Now, in the US, there is a pressure because inflation rate compared to their interest rates is significantly higher. And therefore, there is talk of reducing the amount of new money that is coming into the market. And this will have some amount of impact on the bond prices there. Although, very surprisingly, bond yields have actually gone down, meaning bond prices have actually gone up in the recent few days, in spite of the talk of interest rates being, the tapering being withdrawn and a likely increase in interest rate. Now, so far as Indian markets are concerned, we have to understand how the change in interest rates or the macro scenario in US impacts India. This is done not by way of what Indian investors do. It is largely what the FIIs do. Because for FIIs, there is an option. Now, it is like, your FD is giving 5%, but you can make let's say 8% on markets, purely for example purposes, please. Numbers are only for example. Now, if the FD rates are increased to 6%, there is a tendency for the investors to say, okay, I will move some money of my risky assets, that is equity, into relatively safer assets, that is fixed deposit, because I'm getting 1% extra. So this is the kind of choice the FII will have between investing in quote unquote risky assets, which is equities in emerging markets like India, versus investing in a treasury bond. The risk reward equation changes a bit, and therefore there is a outflow of money from emerging markets like India into US bond markets. And this is what we saw in the quarter of October, November, December. In October, November, December quarter, FII selling was to the tune of 100,000 crores in the cash market. However, as I have told you earlier also, unlike previous, unlike a few years back where FIIs literally dictated the market, now we have a very strong domestic financial institution base which supports the market in such scenarios. And they don't do it for charity. They are seeing a huge inflow of money by way of SIPs and new investments. And they are, whether they like it or not, they have to invest in the markets. So we have seen net domestic financial institution buying in the cash markets to the tune of 66,000 crores, which has significantly offset the FII selling. But what is more interesting is, although the data is only for a few days, but for the first week of January 2022, both FIIs and DFIs have been net buyers. FIIs have been net buyers to the tune of 1,100 crores. Not a very big figure, but you definitely see the change in trend. And it is our house view that money will continue to flow into India. There is no other place in the world that looks poised for the growth that India is poised to achieve. With all the reforms that are happening, with a government that is determined to push ahead irrespective of what others feel, we will keep doing quarterly con calls and discuss GDP rates and interest rates, etc. But the 10-year path to progress will continue to be the same. And we will increasingly see more investments coming into India, consequently, more growth coming into India. And therefore, long-term capital market growth, index growth will continue to happen in India. So that is the main aspect of the macros. Another aspect, I will take 5 minutes to explain this liquidity issue so that we have a basic understanding of how these macros work. Okay, so what is happening is, earlier people didn't worry too much about the macros, but now with a lot of information, lot of media reporting, etc., now everybody seems to be kind of aware of things like what is happening in the US, Fed funds rate, oil prices, even foreign currency and current account deficit, and all these parameters which nobody even understood are now coming into play. And unlike earlier times where the frequency of data reporting was much bigger in terms of time period, time gap, now we get information almost on every alternate day. We are exposed to what is happening in the US, what is happening in Europe, Japan, China, everywhere in the world. And therefore, for the markets, every day there is a story which will either pull up or pull down the markets. So let us understand the concept here, how things work. Okay. Whenever there is a crisis, we are now, if you read any of the fund, like we are having this con call and we are sharing our views. If you look at the views of various funds or experts, etc., clearly you see 2 or 3 line items which are a cause of concern. One, the COVID situation, which we already discussed. Second is the what is happening in the US economy, that also we already discussed. And as a result, the impact on Indian economy and Indian markets. See, whenever there's a crisis, now again, let's say we get into COVID third wave, situation is much worse than what I have said. What will happen? What will happen is now the governments are kind of tuned. Whenever there is a crisis, the response is by way of putting more money. And government doesn't worry about putting more money because it has to simply print. Okay, so very nice terms are used. RBI will lend money to the government, which the government will never return back. RBI doesn't have to give money to anybody. It will simply create the money because that is our money. And as long as we have that currency note in our pocket, which says RBI is promising to give us back that 500 or 2000 rupees whenever we demand, we are very happy. So nothing really happens when the money is created. And this money gets pushed into the market. Typically what happens, and why this is done? Because whenever a COVID-like situation or the global financial crisis-like situation happens, the immediate impact is people lose jobs. People lose their source of livelihood, which means it translates to lower sales for the company. The moment you are out of job or you are not having money, what you do is you cut down on your consumption. You stick to your basics, whatever are your need-based essentials, and rest of the things are postponed or simply just forgotten because you don't have money. And that impacts companies. So producers have issues, their inventories go up, they cut down production, which means again they'll fire workers, they'll cut down costs, which means service providers will get impacted. So this vicious cycle will start and keep impacting people. And that is what we theoretically call, when this goes long enough, if you have 6 months of this scenario, we call that a recession. So what governments do to correct this situation is they simply put artificial money into our hands. How is it done? There are two policies. One is the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. In the fiscal policy, government will cut taxes. It will increase subsidies. It will announce freebies so that people get money in their hands. Then on the monetary policy side, the banks will cut interest rates. The money is made so abundantly available that banks are forced to lend. They'll come up with new products, personal loans, etc. will be given so that people get money in the hands to spend. Now, what is not in control of either the government or anybody else is who receives this money and how that is spent. Unfortunately, a lot of this money goes into the hands of the rich. They are more likely to get loans. So, and these people who are already, adequately covered insofar as their essentials are concerned, there are two choices. Either to use the money, if you are a businessman, you can take a loan and start a factory. Or you simply take the money and invest in real estate, in equities, in gold, wherever. And businessmen have realized over the last few years that it is much more simpler and easier to make money through markets than take the trouble of actually starting factories. Why should I start a car factory if I can simply buy shares of Maruti? Tomorrow, if I don't like the idea, I can always get out. But if I started a car factory, I'm stuck. And this is what is resulting in what we have called as asset bubbles. So what happens on the economy front is the supply shrinks. Now people are no longer producing. People are no longer providing services. Everybody is happy investing in markets. So this sudden shrinkage in supply will result in huge amount of inflation, because now products are not there. There is money to buy, but we cannot buy. And that is where the next cycle starts. So central banks now focus on cutting down inflation. They withdraw the SOPs, increase interest rates, reduce money supply. And as the money coming into the market reduces, the market start correcting. So what happens is the people who are invested in the markets, they will not go back to starting production or providing services. They'll simply shift their money. The asset allocation changes and money again starts chasing better quality investments. And that is what we will see over the next few years. Till the government takes the painful route of causing a lot of difficulty to the common man on the road. As long as we are trying to give painkillers to the common, to the layman, this is what governments will resort to, and this is what will happen. So markets will continue to rise. We will see all sorts of negative news coming in, but so long as the money is flowing in, so long as the measures are not withdrawn, we will see markets going up. The only thing is the money will chase quality stocks, quality investments, and not everything will go up. So we will have a different type of bull and bear market now, which will move in cycles of specific stocks. Money will move. Just before this correction, we've seen huge amounts of money going into IPO. People without understanding what businesses are there, whether it is a Zomato or a Paytm or a Nykaa or irrespective, whatever be the names and whatever be their businesses, people have blindly invested in these stocks because there is money. And they see that, oh, there will be huge listing gains. It's like buying a lottery ticket. Lagi to lagi, nahi to dil lagi. So we invest in the IPO. If we get an allotment, we are sure to make money. And if we don't get an allotment, no problem. There is another 3 IPOs lined up. I will just try my luck there. So when investments happen like that, typically we have seen market corrections. And when IPOs no longer start giving fabulous listing gains, typically a bear market starts. But now we will not see that happening. We will see money again going back to the quality stocks. So what is it that we as investors have to do? We will have to continue to look at our portfolio. We'll have to continue to look at our asset allocation and stick to our disciplined way of investing. Do not go by what are the trends or, what is the latest thing to invest in. As a house, we have never advised investments in cryptos. So the basics is what we have to adhere to. And if we stick to our asset allocation and ensure that where we are investing is quality, then we don't really have to worry about it. We'll be able to comfortably ride this volatility, and over the next 10 years, we should be able to make lots and lots of money. Ram, I think I'll stop here and I'll let you take over.
All right, thanks, Manoj. I'll keep some sectors on the coverage and keep it very brief, and then we can come back to the questions that have been sent in advance. I believe some of the questions have already been addressed, but we'll still pick up the question and summarize what we discussed already so far. So one question that has come to me in some of the other conversations is what has been our view on the chemical sector? As all of you know, we did have in the previous quarter before rebalancing about 4 stocks in our Jewel portfolio, the large mid cap and slice of small cap portfolio. We believe in the market, we divide it into two subsets. One is the top 350 companies, we call it Jewel. The next 650 companies, we call them Spark. So the next 650 is Spark, which is purely small cap. The top 350 is essentially a multi-cap or whatever term you call. We pick the best of the 350 companies. Now, in that Jewel, we had Alkylamines, Atul, Vinati, PI. So what we did is last quarter, we exited a couple of those stocks, which is Alkylamine and the other one is Atul. So the reason is basically we felt that the sector is already facing significant rising input costs, and we saw a deceleration in the earnings of these companies. The sector already got quite a bit heated up, and the input costs, supply chain constraints, and freight costs kind of added to the deceleration. Mainly at that time, there was an increase in crude oil prices and basic ingredients for chemicals, such as benzene, toluene, phenol, caprolactam. These, in that quarter alone, some of the input costs rose 76 to 126% year-on-year basis. So given that, there was an impact, and we decided not to exit the entire space completely. We basically trimmed our exposure. So in the Jewel portfolio, we're holding a couple of stocks, which is Vinati and PI. And incidentally, now Q3 earnings are expected to be better, at least for these companies. I've read a couple of other analysts cover that, and they're expecting a good bounce back in earnings. See, the earnings bounce back, etc., will continue. We look at a slightly longer term trend, and when the quarterly rebalancing happens, we decide on which stocks to retain exposure. On the Spark portfolio, also we have a couple of stocks, which is FCL and Vidhi. All of them are pretty much in the specialty space. And Vidhi is into chemicals for the food industry. So we are neither bullish nor bearish on the sector per se. We are basically holding companies which we feel are strong and which are in a position to pass on the price increases and continue their growth. So that is one. The second sector I wanted to talk about in brief is the gold sector. I mean, we don't have any direct allocation to gold in our portfolio, but we do hold a couple of NBFCs in the banking and financial sector, which are having significant exposure to gold. So these two companies, as you all know, would be Manappuram and Muthoot. Both of them are very solid companies in terms of their execution capabilities, the manpower, the brand. In fact, one of the companies' promoter actually had an accidental death, but still there was no impact on the workings of the company. The next in line people took over. So we don't have any issues in terms of the execution. However, gold, as you all know, is an asset class in itself. And if you look at gold per se, last year it actually reported a -7 to 8% drop, negative returns. But in the last 3 months, gold is up by around 3.5%. The whole Omicron threat to the economy is kind of again increasing the rush into gold a little bit. Gold, as you all know, is a safe haven in terms of volatility and uncertainty. And with Omicron, if the Omicron threat increases, then obviously gold will go up. So gold is a hedge in our equity portfolio here through a couple of proxy stocks. The couple of other points that Manoj mentioned earlier in the call, which is the Federal Reserve, what their stance and the other global central banks have in terms of interest rates, will have an impact. If interest rates rise, then gold will have a slightly negative impact. But if there is geopolitical uncertainty, the kind of which we keep reading with Russia and Kazakhstan, Russia and Ukraine, and some other hotspots, there will be, potentially some buying of gold will happen by central banks to ensure there is stability. Again, too much of interest rate rise will also possibly hit equities, in which case, again, gold will act as a foil. So our submission is that we should have a certain exposure to gold in the portfolio in the form of these two stocks. And it's a good proxy. It's a good hedge against inflation. One interesting data point I saw is that in the last 20 years, the total returns of gold match the total returns of Berkshire Hathaway. I found that chart very interesting. I'll possibly put it up in our Twitter feed or somewhere so that you can all look it up. The other industry which we don't have major exposure in the jewel portfolio, but I'll still talk about it, is the sugar industry. Most of the sugar companies tend to be, so far have been in the small cap space and small to mid cap space. And given their cyclical nature, we've generally avoided sugar. We do have a small exposure to a sugar stock in the Spark portfolio. As we all know, India is the second largest producer of sugar in the world, right after Brazil. We also produce nearly 35 million tons, and Brazil produces some 36.5 million tons. It's a highly cyclical industry, and it's government regulated. Prices tend to be very volatile because of the dependence on the monsoon, because of acreages being very, very volatile. Farmers switches to a different crop if droughts come, and cane cultivation areas, keep going and up and down. And often the middleman or the government may not pay the cane farmer in time, in which case they just go for, whatever other crop is available. These are the cyclicalities of the industry, of the sugar industry, but couple of secular trends. One is, in general, there's an increased consumption of sugar, right? You walk into any lane or street in the country, you will find a lot of department stores selling sugar. You'll find a medical diagnostic center. You'll find a hospital. So that's the whole supply chain, if you may call. And then there'll be a big pharmacy. Fortunately, unfortunately, that's how that economy works. So while we recommend people to avoid sugar in their food, but from an economic standpoint, there are two critical things. Whether you and I like it or not, sugar consumption is going to be on the rise. And second is, the government has recently, as in May 2018, they announced a national biofuel policy in which they wanted to ramp up ethanol. Why? Because they want to reduce oil imports significantly. While that may do good to the current account deficit, I don't know what impact it will cause to the economy and the environment. That's a separate viewpoint, because as you all know, it's a water guzzling crop. But anyway, the government wanted to achieve a 10% blend rate of ethanol with gasoline or petrol by 2022, this year. And they want to increase it to 20% by 2025. So what is happening is, all the sugar companies which are involved in processing sugar, they have started ramping up their capacities. And there is a significant interest from various companies. We do have one stock in our portfolio which we carefully picked after looking at the return on equity, looking at the current pricing of the company, etc., which is Dwarkesh. There could be other thoughts in terms of which stock to hold, etc., but I just wanted to cover this, and with a caveat that it's a highly cyclical industry, and if suddenly government decides to slow down on ethanol, then that sector could suddenly, see a massive sell-off. So we stick to our investment philosophy, which is what we call as roots and wings, which is companies with steady ROE on a continuous basis and steady earnings growth and very low debt. So if we stick to our core principles, most of these stocks do not make the cut. So we are not unhappy or happy. We are not unhappy that we didn't cover some of the sugar sizzlers, because the sizzler may become duds when the season changes. I've covered three sectors, and we are maybe another 20 minutes away. Technology, almost everybody on the call is already familiar with technology. We have a couple of tech stocks in our core portfolio, the Jewel portfolio. Both of them are Tata companies. And TCS, they've just announced a buyback later this month. They're likely to announce, which should do good for the price. And they've also won a very large 6,000 crore contract. If you see broadly what's happening in the whole world, globally speaking, and specifically the US, in 2006, only one in the top 5 most valuable companies was a tech company, and that was Microsoft. The rest were Exxon, GE, etc., Citigroup, etc. 2011, situation remained the same. 2016, all 5 in the top 5 are tech companies. 2021, they've become much, much bigger. So, literally speaking, technology is eating the world. What does it mean to the Indian listed space in specific? The post-COVID digitization of the world, as demonstrated and witnessed by the massive growth in the tech companies, has a huge rub-off, right? Now everybody wants to digitize. So we see a significant traction in the tech sector continue to be there. And that should continue. We also hold Mindtree for that matter. So all stocks, I think we made a very conscious decision to stick to them in terms of the overall portfolio design. I think I'll just end with that. The other theme that we have significantly invested in during the last rebalancing is the manufacturing space. So our exposure to the whole pipe sector and the tire sector, the electricals, as well as plastics, which are all ancillaries to the booming economy, are pretty much in place. And I will end with one point which Manoj said, right? As the macro policies translate, the movement to quality stocks will continue. So we should see, because we believe in quality stocks backed by very strong fundamentals, we should see a good flow into the quality stocks. Of course, the last 3 to 6 months, given the huge mop-up of the IPOs and also large passive funds getting into the index stocks, we've seen that Jewel, kind of kept pace overall with the index on a 6 to 9 month basis. Whereas, Spark obviously did well, because Spark is a portfolio which is, purely into, quality small caps. So if you see the last 1 year basis, Jewel has given a 33% return, whereas the Nifty index has given a 21% return. And but in the last 6 months, they've kind of been nearly flat in terms of comparison. Whereas if you see the Spark portfolio, which we launched in June, 1st of June, in the last I would say 7.5 months, Spark has the model portfolio of Spark, assuming that you bought on the date when the picks were announced. The Spark returns have been nearly 42% versus the BSE small cap being at 26%. So Spark has done pretty well, and it's in consistent rhythm with the pattern that we saw when we backtested the whole portfolio. So that's my little bit on specific sectors and the stocks that we're holding and the overall numbers. I will now turn the focus back on specific questions that have come to us. So I'll read out the questions, and then either Manoj and I will answer them. So we'll go through them first, and then maybe if there is space or time permitting, we can cover other questions later. Manoj, are you able to hear me?
Yes, Ram.
Yeah. So the first question is, which came yesterday or 2 days back, is from Abhiram. Considering the current market situation, rising interest rates, what is your view on deployment of capital?
I think we have answered that question. Okay. So in brief, in India, I am not expecting interest rates to go up. Okay. So can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So considering the current market situation with rising interest rates and unstable markets, with many indicators comparing with those of the dot-com bubble and the 2008 financial crisis, is it wise to deploy fresh capital? Very pertinent question.
Right. So we've already shared our view in terms of what the long-term direction of the markets would be. So if we are not investing money, then what are we doing about it? It has to be there somewhere. Will you keep it in a bank? Will you keep it in gold? What will we do with the money? So the answer lies in asset allocation. Have an asset allocation that suits your profile and then just stick to it and keep investing the money, because not investing the money is also an investment decision which earns zero returns and negative returns in real terms.
Right. Right. So, yes. So I think please invest only to the extent where you can hold on for at least 3 years. Don't commit any capital which you definitely need to pull out in the next 3 years, like your child's college education or some other expense. That is for sure. And then overall, we can definitely have an offline conversation with any client to understand their unique asset allocation needs and help guide them on that. But yeah, fresh capital, always deploy in a staggered basis. No need to rush on it in one go. The second question, the market is expected to move sideways or a minor pullback. What kind of equity allocation is Gamma planning in its dual portfolio to tackle this for good returns? See, we have overall our approach is, unless we talk to the client and decide on a specific liquid or a cash allocation, the idea is to deploy the portfolio into the purpose of wealth creation, which is what you sign up with, right? When we have that initial conversation. So if you commit out of 100 rupees, 60 should go into equities. That 60 should be ideally should stay invested. There's no point trying to tweak within that 45-15 or 50-10, etc. That is our view. And over long term, that gives very good returns. As Manoj said in the earlier parts of the call, there is a significant uptick that we expect over the next 5 years are going to be phenomenal for the Indian economy. So we'll stay invested in that. We'll not try to move into cash and out of cash, etc. On a local basis, on a micro basis. Third question: rising inflation is showing negative effect on FMCG with the announcing price hikes. How do you think this is going to play out in the short, medium term and its effect on the equity market?
I'll take that, Ram.
Yes.
See, while conceptually we understand that if there's inflation, then there will be an impact on FMCG. But practically that has not happened. Okay. In fact, there are some studies that have been done to understand this. If there's a correlation between rising inflation and its impact on FMCG performance, and they have been inconclusive. And the reason for that is that most of these FMCG companies have invested in strong brands. So if you drink Bournvita, you will continue to drink Bournvita even if the price of the jar has increased from whatever to whatever. Some 5-10 rupees increase is not going to matter. Having said that, it is also interesting to note that many of the FMCG products have not seen significant price increases. They have been able to absorb the increase in material costs by way of higher volumes and keeping their prices near flat, I would say. Prices have not increased in line with inflation. So FMCG stocks are continuing to do well in spite of inflation.
Sure. The next question, we're giving preference to the questions that came on email because that's the preferred way, so that, it's whoever asked first, it's better to address them. One question from Sendil is, what is your view on investing in US equities now with Fed tapering off?
Okay, as I told you, if you are investing in the US, between US equities and a US bond, firstly, every investor will have a risk return trade-off equation where we are comfortable. So when the interest rates go up in US, it is not by significant margin. There's a 25 basis point increase, and that too over a 2 quarters or 3 quarters, etc. There's huge resistance in the US whenever the Fed has sought to increase interest rates. So the impact of that in terms of your overall portfolio, I mean, you should not be guided by the change in interest rates for investing in US stocks. Just like Indian stocks, US stocks, there are very good, high quality stocks in the US, and they should, if you have the opportunity to invest in US stocks, that can be considered, but not because there is a likely 0.25% cut in the federal funds rate.
Yeah.
And typically, the theory is, if interest rates go up, the stock prices come down. So if you are investing now in anticipation, then that is not this is a pure theoretical answer. Okay, so if we are expecting interest rates to go up, then the natural extension is the US stocks will go down. So you need to actually wait. But then markets, as I said, are lead indicators. They factor in and the prices go down. So it again boils down to what are your expectations and timing the market. As an investor, long-term investor, look for quality stocks and just go and invest in them without worrying too much about a change in interest rate structure.
Yeah, right now we don't have a US stock portfolio. We are frequently asked about that question, but we will look at it in the future, not right now. Reacting to Fed moves. Yeah, go ahead, Manoj.
No, I think Senthil's question was more generic and not with respect to Jama investment.
Fair point. So I think we'll just move on to the next question, which is I'll now refer to the chat. So one question is from, I think Swaroop C is asking a lot of specific questions to his portfolio. I'll try to still answer them and then maybe have a separate conversation with him for any of his unique questions. Why were specific stocks sold and again re-entered in Jewel, which is Bajaj Finance, Tata Elxsi, Asian Paint, Manappuram, etc. So what happens is in our rebalancing that we do every quarter, we stick to an allocation for a stock. So if the stock runs up in price, we tweak the allocation so that some of the units may be sold. Okay, this is the general process that we follow, where some of the gains are captured and any stock which is not performing as well but is fundamentally good gets an additional investment. This kind of it's like a steering, right? When you drive a car, right? You steer, So that kind of a model has actually helped in the gross returns over time. Yes, the concern could be there is a brokerage, there is a cost, but net of all of that, we've seen that the returns are better than not doing such a rebalancing. Okay. However, again, one more caveat is, for some people who are in the very high income tax bracket, if that adds to their taxable income and therefore increases the surcharge, that is something we would like to understand beforehand, so that we can see if such actions can be minimized, so that the total income that they make, salary plus capital gains, doesn't cross the surcharge limit. Question from Kirit Shah. What are your views on investment in the semiconductor industry? Because government is giving a lot of attention with the new policy and all of that. Manoj?
Yes, Ram. Sorry, I got distracted. What was the question?
No, the views. The question is, given the government impetus on the new semiconductor policy and the PLI scheme, are we going to invest in the semiconductor sector? I mean, let's be to the point. No point giving general gyan on semiconductor, etc. Should we invest?
See, our investments have not been driven by industry parameters. We look at the macros, we look at the industry trends, and you explained about the industries, etc. And semiconductors, definitely there is a case for investment. However, the stock picks are going to be on specific company performance. We are definitely looking at it, and we will pick up stocks. Okay, so semiconductor, definitely an area of interest for us. We will invest, but only in those stocks which meet our criteria.
Yeah. There's one question: why exit in Spark a specific stock? See, once a stock doesn't meet the required growth parameters, I think this specific stock, XPSol, there was a dip in the operating income, which is why we exited. And I do understand that that stock did run up after we exited. But that is something that is beyond our control. We have to react to the numbers and stick to the principles that we set out for ourselves. Having said all of that, I would still say that the Spark portfolio has delivered a nearly 8% return since we did rebalancing. Only in the last, I would say just 5 weeks alone. Which is a reasonable return. Yes, I do understand and accept that some stocks that we exited did run up after that. But that's the nature of the beast there. The small cap space is going to be volatile. And I would request you to take a look at the portfolio as opposed to specific stock, because we just can't cherry pick all the time. Krishna's question is, please share your perspective on the bank sector. How is it going to perform in the short to medium term? Any specific banks to focus on? See, banking is going to be a core sector. Banking and finance is going to be the lubricant of the economy. So any growth in the economy will require credit, and it's the that's the way it works. And if you look even at the innovation ecosystem, the whole fintech space is considered a very core element of the cutting edge innovation as well. So banking sector is important. Now, what's very important in banks is the cost of funds. And secondly, at what rate are they lending? And are they able to make a fantastic net interest margin? And are they going to keep their net non-performing assets low so that the return on asset is high? So if you look at this entire chain, very few banks make the cut. None of the PSU banks make the cut for us. Only HDFC Bank makes. A couple of other banks are pretty good, which is ICICI Bank and Kotak Bank, but we can't, put a bus and put every stock in it, then we'll become like the index. So, and plus, there has been a history of NPAs with ICICI, and I know Mr. Bakshi is doing a fantastic job, great leader. He was the CEO of one of the companies I used to work for. But right now, I would say in the banking space, we currently hold HDFC. On the NBFC space, we have a good exposure to consumer finance with Bajaj, to asset-based finance with Chola, to gold finance, like I discussed earlier, with Muthoot and Manappuram, and very importantly in the real estate finance, which is Canfin Homes, in the affordable housing space, which is it's a great company as well. So that's our view. I mean, we will not reduce our exposure to banking and financial services to, let's say, below 20%. At the same time, we'll not ramp it up to beyond 40-45%, then we'll become too overweight. So we'll continue to hold the sector with specific picks that meet our criteria. Lakshmi Narayana, in IT, is there a reason to choose TCS over Infosys? Both are very good companies. TCS has built bigger platforms, has got better margin track record. Infosys under the new leader also has caught up quite a bit. It's a great company. I personally spent nearly a decade and a half working in that company, and it's like an alma mater for me. So it's a very tough choice. I think given our numbers, there's a slight edge that TCS currently has over Infosys, but I would say it's a good company as well. Okay, Mr. Kadakia is giving an advice on using a mic next time. Fine. I think there was a network issue, probably not the microphone issue, but we'll definitely keep it in mind. Sandhya is asking, what is your view on Mastech? I've not covered that stock in detail. I think it's a great company, a lot of good product they've built in the insurance space. It's I can't answer that question right now off the top of my head, but it's a good software company is what I gather. Next question, Lakshmi Narayana, Tata Elxsi is performing flat, even though the market is going 400 points, 200 points down. I don't know, sir. I mean, we can't respond to market X points up, down, etc. and why is stock not moving up. Our whole philosophy is on picking a good stock and staying invested until the fundamentals weaken up. So we can't respond to price movements. I told this earlier about Explio as well. But as we speak, the stock is doing really well from a business perspective. Their exposure to the EV ecosystem is also pretty significant. So if you're looking at an EV play, I think that question also came. Let me also cover a few seconds on that. The EV play is very interesting, very exciting, like the semiconductor, but we'll have to wait and watch till companies demonstrate good track record. I would say Tata Elxsi will continue to hold unless we have a reason to not be happy with their sales or earnings performance or any other parameters on the root side. Praful is saying there was a tweet by Elon Musk about global recession. I don't understand the English. No later than second half of the current year. Any views on this aspect? I think Manoj has already answered that. Right, Manoj?
Yeah. See, we will never be able to predict when exactly we'll be hit by what. And so stick to the asset allocation and remain invested is what we'll say. Stick to the quality stocks. Recession or no recession, we need to ride out the volatility.
Okay. Next question by Lakshmi again. What is your angle on vaccine makers amid rising COVID cases? Is it good to hold stocks before government issues booster doses? Manoj?
See, our approach has not been to look at specific developments and then look at stocks. Okay. So there's a huge universe there, and each of the companies will have something going for it. Okay, so we are definitely looking at the vaccine makers. Okay, but overall, the company has to make to be very in one sentence. We have to be true to our model. Okay, if the stock meets our criteria, it is into our portfolio. If the stock is not meeting the criteria, we don't mind getting into the stock little later, but we do not pick stocks on the basis of expectations. So will government give orders for a booster dose? Which company will get impacted? Is, to override the model and speculate on our understanding. We would want to avoid that. So, we are not going to pick stocks just because of the anticipation of a booster dose. But yes, if the company does well, absolutely no issues picking it up little later, even if it is at a higher price, no problem.
Yeah, I think next Swaroop again had a question on the transaction in his portfolio. We'll take it later. But I think if I were to understand the sentiment behind his question, which is very valid, is there seems to be a lot of action. and there's brokerage and all of that is what he said. See, like I said, in rebalancing, we do allocation and there'll be some amount of trimming that will happen. In which case small units may get sold from a specific stock. In some cases, we may exit a stock. So, I mean, it's very important to steer the boat in the right direction. Otherwise, it will go adrift. And, if you're using a zero brokerage account, then the brokerage impact is actually very, very minimal. There could be some minor tax impact, but that's, we've done various simulations. I myself do exactly the same rebalancing a few days after my clients do it. And yes, there is an impact, but overall, if you see, it's better to avoid a stock which is having poor fundamentals or stick to the allocation and, move in that direction. So that really helps over the long term. But if there's any specific transaction related part, happy to discuss with Swaroop on that. I think Ravi will definitely speak with him. Jay is asking a question: to diversify portfolio, are you planning to start any US stock specific? This is a frequently asked question to us because, everybody says if the model is working good in fact, since inception, I didn't mention this. Since inception, our model portfolio has given a 45% CAGR, which compares very well with the Nifty CAGR of about 24.8%. So the model has done well, but yes, this has happened over 2.5, 3 years. So it takes time. Please don't judge by 1 quarter or 2 quarters or even 1 year, because every model will have its ups and downs. It's very difficult to keep something, always in the top bracket. But yes, we have consistently done well. Consistency is where we want to be, which is why the sentiment that Manoj expressed in terms of picking or not picking a stock is very, very important. So US stocks we will do, but we will do it only after a very detailed number crunching, hypothesis, back testing, and then soft launch. So it will take time. We don't rush into things. We launched Spark, 2 years after we launched Jewel, only when we were comfortable with the way things are working. And touchwood, so far Spark has done really well, 42% in 7 months, in spite of avoiding or exiting certain stocks which later went up well. I would say that makes it gives confidence on the portfolio as opposed to making individual punts. We may look at other portfolios also in due course. For example, cyclicals is definitely of interest because it's a very interesting number analysis, trying to not punt, but figuring out numerically how a cycle is performing, within that how a specific stock is performing in terms of its relative to other companies, and how to time your entry and exit with a plus minus 20% variance. That's a very interesting problem to solve. We will probably look at it sometime later this year or next year, the cyclicals also. Now, Lakshmi Narayana question: what is your angle on renewable energy like solar and EV? Again, very interesting hot space. We already have exposure to EV through the Tata Elxsi investments. But every stock has to meet all the stringent criteria we have. So we just don't pick a stock based on a theme yet. Again, if required, we'll build a theme portfolio separately. But if you are talking about Roots and Wings and Jewel and Spark, we have to stick to the model. And if we are constantly on the lookout, if a stock really meets that criteria, we'll definitely consider it. If you consider the broader EV space in terms of the batteries, the plastics, the engine. So there's a lot of elements in it, and there are decent number of stocks in all of them. Many of them are very small, but we want to make sure that these stocks meet our criteria of strong balance sheets and strong P&L, not just based on expectations or assumptions. Sendil, or US fund of funds on the MF side, if US equity research is a constraint. Sendil will be happy to discuss in person on that. I would say, my personal read in addition to what Manoj said is that I feel the US market is definitely quite heated up. We've seen a lot of high growth stocks take a massive beating of 40 to 60% fall in the last few months, right? Only the top index stocks are holding the market up. And we don't know how long that will last. There could be a correction. So there's a lot of volatility there. We don't understand US as such. A fund of fund or index, if you're very keen, is probably not a bad idea at all. Srinivas, you asks us, bank stocks. I think I've already answered that. Canfin has actually done well. Manappuram, yeah, gold factor. HDFC again has been flat. And I think Ramesh has already answered that. 2022, Hardik is asking. I think that has already been covered in ample depth by Manoj. What is your view on infra and defense sectors as the government? Again, the same answer as before, like semiconductor. See, the infra sector, my additional view, and Manoj, you may add, is that infra sector is characterized by companies with very low return on equity compared to other sectors, right? So by definition, we don't get into low ROE companies because they tend to be structurally weak. And if you take a large exposure, unnecessarily, you are again, you are hostage to the ups and downs of the market too much. But there are other plays, right? If let's say the government is spending so much on roads and other kinds of infrastructure, then there'll be a housing boom in that area. You will find a lot of housing related ancillaries in which we are heavily invested in. That sector should, so we are looking at second order and third order effects as opposed to the first order effects where there could be structural weaknesses in the industry per se. Money will be made, but I don't know how much of money a retail investor sitting 5 steps away on the value chain can actually make, right? The promoter will probably make a lot of money, but we need to be careful in terms of what kind of company we're entering into. Manoj, would you like to add to that?
No, I think you covered, Ram. That's good.
Okay. Ramesh is asking another question. We have another 2 questions left. We are over time, but we'll still cover and complete that. LIC is likely to announce their IPO for Jan 4th week. Your thoughts on investing directly? Sir, our humble request is, in general, avoid IPOs. Let's wait for the stocks to come through, and let's see how the track record is over time. We've in general avoided. LIC definitely will be a very unique launch. Probably it could even become the world's most valuable insurance company, given the massive market share they have in India. But then again, it's a government-run company, and LIC is used for many tactical requirements by the governments in power. So I don't know whether it will make a great long-term investment. I may be completely wrong, but I would personally avoid the LIC IPO. I would wait for some traction to see how they, not just the share price, but how the disclosures happen, how, various things come out and play. That's my view. Manoj, you want to add to that?
Again, we, as you rightly said, we avoid IPOs and all that. But LIC is likely to see a very good listing. So you want to try, you want to buy a lottery ticket, go ahead, take your chance. But whether we want to hold on to LIC or not will depend on its fundamentals and its future performance. Like once we have the company listed, then there's a lot more data that we'll have access to, and therefore we'll be able to come up with a much more informed view. Okay, but as Ram said, the company is a market leader. It has got captive, clients, great distribution. So there's a lot going for that company.
Correct.
How does it and again, on the other side, we have, the company being used for all kind of government schemes, subsidizing other investments, etc. So it has been a black hole for quite some time. Both UTI and LIC have been massively misused by the government. So let's see, we'll have to look at more details, but just if your specific question is of an IPO,
yeah,
I think you can
Manoj,
just...
Yeah, I think Manoj, I mean, you're right. You and Ram are right. We'll probably have to wait and see how it pans out. But to your point on the company being misused, right, by the government, I mean, that was in the past. I think the current government has not done anything, untoward with LIC in terms of funding. So basically, I mean, what all happened?
if I remember right, IDBI Bank shares LIC had to buy. Okay, whenever the government had to bail out other institutions, it has fallen on LIC. So, just because, see, the insurance company, you have to understand the model, how it works.
Yeah.
Every month, it gets huge amount of cash inflows. All of us who have taken insurance policies regularly pay our premiums because we're scared of our life. Okay, insurance companies give very pathetic returns on our insurance policies. So insurance companies are usually cash rich and they are very heavy investors, and that's a great source of income for them. But when this money gets siphoned off and when the company is forced into investing into instruments that are not going to be remunerative, that is where the problem will come. And that is why I am saying that while the business model is great, we have to look at the financials.
Sir, one example I'll give you. Example, you take GIC, General Insurance Corporation, or General Insurance Company, which primarily does reinsurance, and it's a public sector undertaking. It's owned by the government of India. And this listed about 4 years back, 3.5 years back, at 417 rupees. It's almost a monopoly for reinsurance. But if you look at their annual report, balance sheet, the subsidiaries they have in some African countries and this and that, all of that, today the stock, jo 417 pe list hua tha, today it trades at 140 rupees. And in the last 3.5 years, we've seen what kind of bull market has been in the Indian market. So the problem is that the management, their capability, competence, their skin in the game, lot of elements come into play for PSUs. So we are very, very, exception is Can Fin Homes. It is also kind of government ancillary unit. But we have to be very careful coming, especially these large companies, right? So yeah, there'll be excitement. But over time, if you see the GIC stock, it's just gone steadily down from 400 plus rupees to 140 rupees.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Okay. Subbarao is asking about our stock selection criteria. It's all on our website, so you can read it. But basically, we pick companies with strong balance sheets and good earnings, healthy earnings, promoters who have skin in the game, who are aligned with the company's growth. And then we convert all of this into literally hundreds of data points on which we run our proprietary algos, which does 90% of the work. And then we do the next bit, which is figuring out the sectoral allocation and fine-tuning and all of that. And we strongly go by data in going by the stock selection. Last question, Havells performance. Again, sir, please don't judge a company by one quarter or next quarter. We are ruthless in terms of data-based selection. If it doesn't meet the criteria, if it falls behind, we'll exit it. We have no love for any particular company or a particular stock. I think that's it. I've covered all the questions. I hope nothing has been left. If still we have left out anything, please do email us. You have our email IDs, advisor@jamawealth.com or my ID, ram@jamawealth.com. You can send it. I will definitely discuss every question with Manoj and come back with a personal response to each one of you. Thank you so much for your time on a Saturday morning and afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram.
Yeah. Good show. Thank you, Ram and Manoj. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.